We are back, and we're drawing back the curtains to take you deep inside the war rooms in the '08 race for the White House. Still with us, Rachel Maddow, Harold Ford Jr., Ron Brownstein, and Joe Scarborough. First up here, the Clinton campaign literally going for broke. The campaign ended February with $33 million in the war chest, but according to election rules, only $11 million of that can be spent on battling Obama in the primaries. Politico laid out the numbers today to the quote board. If she had paid off the $8.7 million in unpaid bills she reported as debt and had not loaned her campaign $5 million, she would have been nearly $3 million in the red at the end of February. By contrast, if you subtract Obama's $625,000 in debts and his general election-only money from his total cash on hand at the end of last month, he'd still be left with $31 million. Earlier this afternoon, Clinton spokesman Howard Wolfson insisted to MSNBC the campaign's cash flow is good. Does that make sense to you, Joe?
Well, I don't know about the cash flow being good, but they certainly can survive it a lot better in March and April than they could have in January or February. The reason why we're not seeing this on the front pages of all the newspapers now is obviously Hillary Clinton's got about 4 more weeks until Pennsylvania, the next big contest. So she has a chance to reload. This Politico story, though, is obviously where they want it to end. They want to pay off those bills in Ohio and in some of the other states where the vendors are starting to complain and raise the money, bring it in. So timing is everything, and she's fortunate to have not run into these problems earlier.
But Ron, speak tactically here. What does it matter on the ground? Is it not an impact to her? You see what's happening in Pennsylvania. He's up on the air spending a lot more money on TV than she is. Does she have the ability to keep going?
Well, right. Well, the reality is, first of all, that Hillary Clinton raised more in donations of $200 or less in February, it's about $17 million, than she did in the entire campaign up to that point. She was able to tap into a base of small donors that people assumed did not exist for her. But she is facing a candidate who is setting an absolutely blistering financial pace. I mean, we talk about the breakthroughs that Howard Dean made on the Internet and among small donors. Well, in February, Barack Obama raised more in donations of $200 or less than Howard Dean did in his entire campaign. So keeping up with that is very difficult. And what we don't know is whether Clinton has been able to sustain the fundraising in February in March, as she has faced more questions about whether she should stay in the race. I have a feeling that money is not going to be the decisive factor between now and Pennsylvania, maybe as Joe suggests. But if you do get more anxiety among Democrats about this dragging on, that is one place where she could feel the pinch over time.
All right, next up, John Edwards is still mum on who's getting his endorsement for president, but it's not looking too good for Barack Obama. New York Magazine reports that during a phone call after Edwards dropped out, quote, Obama came across as a glib and aloof. Clinton, by contrast, engaged Edwards in a lengthy policy discussion. In his own Edwards sit-down, Obama dug himself in deeper, getting into a fight about Elizabeth and health care and her plans for health care, that his plan is universal, a position she considers a crock, and high-handedly criticizing Clinton's plan and, by extension, Edwards' plan as well for its insurance mandate. Rachel, what do you make of it?
I think this would be a really big deal if John Edwards' endorsement was going to be determinative. I just don't think that John Edwards or even Al Gore or any other Democrat has the stature that's going to be a tipping factor in this race. I think the endorsements are interesting, and the endorsements, when they are superdelegates, have a quantitative effect on who's going to get the nomination. But nobody from any of the other presidential candidates to any of the elder statesmen in the Democratic Party has enough juice to push this thing one way or the other. That's not the way this thing's going to resolve.
Harold, that's a provocative point. Does John Edwards really matter at this stage?
I think he's relevant, but I think Rachel's point is well taken, that this is now up to the voters. If endorsements and pundits and the careful analysis provided by so many in media really matter to the extent that some of us want it, this thing would have been over a long time ago. The reality is voters want to be heard. Now, I must say, if you're in the Hillary Clinton camp or the Barack Obama camp, and in light of the last story about money, on the Clinton side, you would certainly welcome an endorsement from John Edwards. He was a candidate for president himself. Sure. He fought in this thing like these two other guys did, along with the several others that ran, and his endorsement has been coveted. I think it would probably have a little more of an impact than some of the others, but at the same time, Pennsylvanians are going to decide based on whom they believe is best suited to represent their interests. And as much as I like, respect, and admire John Edwards and his wife, voters there are going to listen more closely to their neighbors and their friends there.
We're still in the war room. Moving on, indications that the Clinton camp is again playing the gender card. Clinton senior advisor and director of women's outreach, Ann Lewis, told the Associated Press this, quote, my email is bursting with women who are furious, and it's grown in the last week. They were very angry that people would be so dismissive of Hillary and by extension of them and what they value. Ron, who are they talking about?
Well, in general, I think it's a dangerous thing for Obama to have his supporters, as Pat Leahy did last week, call on Senator Clinton to get out. It is a very easy thing to turn around against his campaign, as I think they recognize, not only among women, but among all the voters in the remaining states. You can make the argument that, in effect, the insiders are trying to disenfranchise you. It's a very easy argument to make, and I think that's why you saw him move so quickly away from those comments. But look, that is part of the reason why Hillary Clinton raised all that money from small donors that I talked about in February. There are a lot of women in the Democratic Party who are very reluctant to see this campaign fizzle out. I was in San Antonio the weekend before the Texas primary with 40 women who had flown down on their own expense from San Francisco, the Bay Area, to campaign for Hillary Clinton. So there is that emotion, that passion. Now, whether it's enough to overturn Barack Obama's lead is another question, but there's no question that emotion is there, and that is what Ann Lewis is picking at.
I would just
and finally, inside the war room, Obama this weekend attempting to chip away at Clinton's double-digit lead in Pennsylvania, launching what some are calling a charm offensive in the Keystone State. Listen.
We've played some basketball with Bob Casey, and neither of us got injured. We have stopped by some sports bars, I must admit, and had a few beers. And then we went bowling, which didn't go so well. There was an 8-year-old who was giving me tips.
Joe, you know a thing or two about retail politics here. What do you make in what is a little bit of a change in him getting out there, who he's trying to appeal to, as opposed to what he's known for, which are the big rallies, the soaring oratory?
Well, he needs to do that. But my gosh, if you're going to do it, be like Ronald Reagan. Like Reagan went to South Boston back in 1984. He held up a mug of beer. He drank it. He looked like he belonged. Barack Obama, from what my good friend Harold Ford tells me, he's a good athlete. But when it comes to bowling, he bowls like my 4.5-year-old daughter. He got a 37. A 37. Look at this. Look at him. Look, Ray.
And you can't wear those kind of shoes and run for president.
You cannot bowl a 37 in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and expect to get Reagan Democrats on your side.
You heard it here on MSNBC. Barack Obama bowls like a girl, says Morning Joe Scarborough.
Well, you know what?
This is going to come back. This is going to come back.
You know what, Rachel? I don't think that's not just such a shocking assessment. I think a lot of people are saying it, a 37.